Unsurprisingly, the creators gracefully stick the landing and make a great finale. For this video, I'll reserve talking about the overall season since I want to do that in an upcoming video, and I'll put the emphasis on the finale for this review. Now, initially, I felt a little underwhelmed due to the anticlimactic nature of the episode, but that's kind of the inherent nature of where the season was going. There was a lot of setup as to war preparations in this episode, and we kind of get that feeling of the battle drums starting to play, only for the season to end. However, I think the creators did a good job to offset that unsatisfied feeling by making an incredible dragon chase sequence, along with other aspects I'll get into later. The production value here is literally unmatched by any show on television, and it's even wild to me that The Rings of Power has a bigger budget than this show, and House of the Dragon is still significantly better. Because goddamn, the dragons, cinematography, dark and rainy atmosphere, and landscapes culminate to make an epic and immersive experience for the finale. The entire chase scene was imbued with so much tension and terror as we slowly realize what is about to happen, unless if you were spoiled by the leaks, like me. But even the foreshadowing of Lucerys heading into a storm for his travels tells the audience what is about to come. Then the second he lands at Storm's End and sees Vhagar, we all knew we were in for a treat. Aemond here is a gem of an actor, or should I say sapphire, and even when he accidentally kills Lucerys, he is able to showcase so much regret and horror for what just transpired. Under that malicious facade of wanting to be menacing is still a human being that realizes he went too far, only for Vhagar to go off the rails and go out of Aemond's control, which the development where the dragons disobey their riders adds another layer of complexity that they aren't just weapons, but creatures with complicated feelings, essentially calling back to Viserys saying that they don't actually control dragons.
The idea that we control the dragons is an illusion.
So now the war is starting because Granny Vhagar got sucker punched by Arax and wanted some revenge. Looking at the cinematography of this scene, it was masterfully done as it showed off the terrifying skill of Vhagar as her silhouette punches through the clouds. It made for an immensely scary experience because any wrong move Lucerys makes here will mean his death. Even the build-up to this chase where he's frantically trying to get out of there was incredibly unsettling, primarily due to the fact that there was a raging storm, so visibility was limited as to where Vhagar was. Just a perfect example of how the setting aids the scene, and even this is contrasted when Arax and Lucerys fly above the clouds, giving us a sense of relief, just for it to be snuffed out when Vhagar comes in with her big chompers. Easily a top 5 scene for the season, and honestly, I don't know how you can make a scene have more tension than that. It was 10 minutes of pure unadulterated anxiety. On top of the fact that in the back of our minds, Lucerys is kind of expendable to an extent due to how many children Rhaenyra has. So even when he was in the throne room, I was worrying for his safety. All Aemond has to do is crack a smile at Lucerys and I'd immediately start running for the hills. So the fact that Lucerys didn't immediately turn around upon seeing Vhagar was very brave, despite it being a major mistake on his part. Another aspect that I loved within this episode is the opposition between Rhaenyra and Daemon. This kind of harkens back to the episode prior where there was turmoil between Otto and Alicent. It's a really intriguing conflict when people on the same side start to fight with one another, because you assume no matter what, they'll support each other. But in reality, not everyone has the same exact motivations, and there'll be some conflict and headbutting along the way. So seeing Daemon being extremely horny to kill some people and start a war, and that being contrasted with Rhaenyra's restraint, was great character work. It really paints Rhaenyra as a good leader here, and even when she seemed like she was hesitating, her intuition was still really strong. The conflict between Rhaenyra and Daemon also led to some choking, and I've seen some people get mad at Daemon for this. But I mean, it's Daemon. That's definitely in character for him since he's a lot more impulsive and quickly swayed by anger. And come on, she was blabbering on about a Song of Ice and Fire again, so she kind of deserved it. Which is also a really weird point for her to put emphasis on in terms of motivation as not wanting to go to war. Now, I know it isn't just that, but the fact that the writers are including this as a reason feels bizarre because it has no relevance whatsoever to House of the Dragon. It feels like the executives at HBO are forcing Ryan Condal to keep making callbacks to the Night King and the Prince Who Was Promised because they probably want to bring that all back in the Jon Snow sequel show that they are developing. That's just my theory, and I can't think of any other reason why the writers would keep bringing it up. Because why keep setting this up when we know as an audience that it doesn't have payoff within House of the Dragon? Going back to Daemon, he's a loose cannon who does not have strong morals, and having that be contrasted with Rhaenyra who does, makes for a good dynamic. It's just immensely funny to me whenever Daemon is on the sidelines roasting Otto and throwing in some insane quips that the writers cook up, only to act like a disappointed child that he can't go on a murder spree. I also love how the Dragonstone walkway scene was a mirror to episode 2, where they confront Daemon about stealing a dragon egg. It follows a very similar scene progression where Daemon is quick to violence, while Rhaenyra is the one to defuse everything. That's an interesting point of comparison, and Otto as well gets to survive again. This man has balls of pure steel for going to Dragonstone to face off against his enemy twice. Next, we should address the miscarriage scene. Now, I really enjoyed this scene and even loved how the writing kept stacking up stressful elements, culminating in an explosive ending, which, chef's kiss. But it felt like a retread to go through these motions again. Within this season, we've had 4 birth scenes, assuming I'm not forgetting any, which that amount is pretty insane on its own. Personally, this doesn't really bother me as much as it does for other people from what I've seen, but with so many of these scenes, I feel like it lessens the impact of it due to its frequency within the show. It's hard to say if they should have removed one of them to make the miscarriage scene more of a special event, but each of them requires such a visceral performance from the actor that the scenes are inherently jaw-dropping. The one birth scene story-wise I'd consider cutting would be Rhaenyra giving birth to her 3rd child in episode 6, but even then, the whole scene was a oneer and was extremely impressive. At the end of the day, I don't dislike these scenes, and I think they were all done very well, besides maybe Laena's, but I can see why people would get upset by this, along with it being pretty graphic even though this is a very mature show. I just hope going forward we ease off a bit on the birth scenes, because I think we've had enough. Story-wise, I assume there won't be any more or much more. The integration of it within this episode was still good, and I like how they were squeezing in other scenes to ratchet up the tension. Like Daemon testing the loyalty of the Kingsguard by bringing out Caraxes was a great moment. I especially loved the shot where they angled Caraxes' head behind Daemon's body to show off the dragon's scale. God, the cinematography in terms of dragon coverage has been mind-blowing. I don't really remember any particular shots within Game of Thrones that blew me away, but within this episode alone, I was getting floored by their presentation. Even with Daemon trying to tame that beast of a dragon, which firstly, great vocals for Daemon, and secondly, the dragon revealing his size by breathing fire and lighting up the room was an iconic visual. Then the reflection in their eyes was both 2 amazing shots and a good story beat to punctuate them bonding. Which, I don't know if they specifically bonded, and if a dragon rider can have more than one dragon. It would be pretty weird if he's cheating on Caraxes, but I assume he's taming the dragon so someone else can ride it. Makes me really thirst for what future battles will look like with all these massive dragons. HBO is going to have to crank up that budget for the later seasons at this rate. And then lastly, I love how much attention they are putting towards strategy, like Daemon immediately laying out plans for defense, and Rhaenyra weighing her options of all her allies. These types of scenes might not be loved, but I just find them so interesting because of how detailed they are, and how much world building comes along with them. That and the Dragonstone map being lit up by fire is a pure example of why the production design in House of the Dragon is a step up above Game of Thrones. I know that essentially boils down to money, but House of the Dragon has been spending it really well. Then Corlys comes out, and I like how prior to this scene, they set up how Corlys is not wanting to help Rhaenyra, but Rhaenys of all people is in support of her now. Primarily because of her pure intentions and not wanting to immediately start a war, similar to Rhaenys' thought process at the end of the last episode. So this essentially leaves a question mark as to if Corlys will help Rhaenyra when he shows up, because we don't know if the persuasion from Rhaenys made a difference. Then that iconic Valyrian theme plays, and he triumphantly pledges his support for her. It was so uplifting and was much needed because Rhaenyra was down bad. Overall, a great end to an outstanding season of House of the Dragon. This episode was so well balanced in terms of tension, conflict, and moments of relief where our heroes have a moment of victory, just for it to end and leave us with a cliffhanger as to what Rhaenyra's wrath will look like. Now we gotta wait 1.5 to 2 years. Feels bad, man. Thank you for watching, and keep an eye out in the coming days for my overall season review.